We are live, so good morning, everyone, or good almost afternoon. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, and we do have some first-time classes today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And we are really excited because this is a whole new year for us and a new decade, and this is just our first week back in 2020, so we really appreciate you joining us as we celebrate Epic Earth. Amazing places, amazing people, great stories from all across the globe. We have a really diverse slate of sessions this month, and we're so excited you guys could be a part. So we've got 6 classes joining us from across North America right now. I'm going to give them a chance to do a bit of a shout out, and then we will dive in and introduce our speaker. So we've got Miss Prezenko's grade 3-4s in Lindsay in Ontario. Hey guys. Hey, oh, we got right there we go. Hey. Welcome in. Awesome. And the first dab, of course. We've got Miss Rutkowski's grade 3-4s in Boulder, Colorado. Hi, guys. Hey, welcome in. All right, we've got Miss Eagle's grade 3s in San Antonio in Texas. Hi, guys. I promised Texas would be enthusiastic, and they delivered. Miss Gary's grade 2s in Woodbury in Minnesota. Hi, guys. Hello. There's so many of you. I love it. And there's this cool sculpture thing I need to figure out in the back. We've got Miss Hudson's grade 4s in St. John's in Newfoundland. Yes. Awesome. All right. And last but not least, we've got Miss Henshaw's grade 2s in Delbarton in West Virginia. Let me just get their mic. Hey, guys. Yeah. Hi. You guys are so cute. I love it. All right. Welcome in, everyone. And so, of course, the reason you guys are all here is for our speaker. So we are joined live in a log cabin in Virginia by Michael Brown. So he is a conservation ecologist whose conservation work is run jointly through the Giraffe Conservation Foundation and the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. And today he's going to talk to us about giraffe conservation in Uganda and across East Africa. Some really, really cool stuff. It's our first ever giraffe session. So I'm really excited about this. You guys seem to be too. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. Thank you so much for joining us, and you can take it away.
Awesome. Hi, can everyone hear me fine?
We're great, yeah.
Awesome, perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction, Jesse. I'm really, really excited to be here with you all today to share some of the work we've been doing studying giraffe and working to conserve giraffe across East Africa and Africa as a continent. Now, as Jesse just mentioned, I'm Michael Brown. I'm a conservation ecologist, and I work with an organization called the Giraffe Conservation Foundation and an organization called the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. Now, some of you guys might be asking yourself right now, what exactly is a conservation ecologist? So what I do is use science to try to understand how animals interact with their environment, and then use that understanding to help people who live in those areas protect those animals. I work a lot of times over in East Africa, and if you look behind me right now, you might not guess that I'm in East Africa, and you'd be correct. Right now, I am in, as Jesse mentioned, my log cabin in Virginia. Some of you guys are just up the road in West Virginia. If any of you have been to Shenandoah National Park, it's just like 200 meters in that direction. So it's a really pretty place. I do a lot of traveling for my job, which means I spend a lot of time all over Africa and a lot of time here in the States working with some really smart scientists to try to figure out the best ways to protect these animals. So this is what I look like when I'm here in Virginia, but when I'm over in Africa, let me see if I can share this. This is what I look like. So this is me studying some giraffe over in Uganda. So I've been spending probably like the last 5 years of my life or so working with giraffes and trying to understand giraffes and their environment so we can better protect them. Now I am fascinated with giraffe. I'm guessing that you guys are all fascinated with giraffe too. And this is a pretty common thing. So people have been fascinated with giraffe for thousands of years. This is a picture of some rock art I took in Namibia, and you can see there's what appears to be lions, there's some zebras up there, and here on the left is a really big giraffe. And what's cool about this rock art is it's over 1,000 years old. So people have been really fascinated with giraffes for over thousands of years. And looking at them, it's really not hard to figure out why. Some of you guys may have seen them on TV. Some of you guys may have seen them in zoos, but they're always really interesting and they're always really captivating. And one of the first things that really catches your eye when you look at a giraffe is just how big they are. So giraffe are the tallest animals on the planet, with males getting up to 17.5 feet. For the Canadians, that's 5.3 meters. And females, 14 feet, roughly 4.3 meters, with the largest giraffe ever on record being over 19 feet tall. So they're enormously big animals. That's so tall. By comparison, we have a little person who's about the size of me standing right next to a male giraffe here. You can see how much taller they are. Now, giraffe are also extremely heavy, with males on average weighing around 2,600 pounds, which is roughly 1,200 kilograms. Females a little bit less, 1,800 pounds, but the heaviest giraffe ever was over 4,200 pounds. And by comparison, that's like a Ford F-150 pickup truck they weigh. So they're really big, really heavy animals. And one of the most interesting things, one of the things that sticks out the most is their long neck. So giraffe have this really long neck, unlike any other animal out there. But what's cool about the neck is it has 7 vertebrae, 7 bones in the neck, which is the same number of bones that you or I have in the neck. So giraffes' necks are really long, but they have the same number of bones. And then if you look at that neck, you might wonder why they have such a long neck when there's so many other animals out there that don't. So what about giraffe makes them so unique that they need this long neck? One of it is access to food. So giraffe live in places where there's lots of other animals out there, and they're all kind of competing for very similar food items in the environment. So by being able to reach higher things, giraffe can get access to food that other animals don't. Another reason that scientists have suspected that giraffes may have long neck is vigilance. So what vigilance means is giraffe live in environment, they live in places where there's things out there that want to eat them. Things like lions, things like hyenas, things like leopards that might be able to eat them or eat their babies. And being able to look out over a savanna and see things coming at you from a long distance is really helpful. And one of the other reasons people think giraffes might have long necks is fighting among males. So giraffe males, the boys, fight each other sometimes to gain access to certain resources. And they do this in a really interesting way that not a lot of animals do. And I'll share a video with you in just a second. But to give you a bit of comparison at how different male and female giraffe sizes are, here's a picture I took of some giraffe in Uganda. A big male, fully grown adult male on the left, and a fully grown adult female on the right. And you can see that even when they're fully grown, males are very, very big. And you can see here, this is a video I took of some giraffe in Uganda. And this is how the males actually fight each other. So unlike sheep or deer or moose or elk, where they'll hit each other head on, male giraffes will line up next to each other and they'll swing their long necks and their heavy heads and they'll try to hit each other. And so giraffes with long necks and heavy heads are a little bit better at fighting. And that's one of the reasons scientists think there might be long necks. Now I mentioned foraging as well, what giraffes eat. So giraffe are really cool in that they're what we call browsers. And what a browser is an animal that eats leaves off of trees and shrubs. So to do this, giraffe often eat really spiny, prickly, thorny foods that are like, if you try to rub up against them, they'll cut your skin. But giraffe are really good at taking leaves and seed pods and flowers off of these. And to do this, they use their dexterous lips, and they've got a tongue which is almost 20 inches long that they can use. And it'll stretch out and they can wrap it and use it to manipulate these plants and work around the thorns and spines. So they eat predominantly leaves and shoots and flowers and seeds on trees, because I said they're browsers. Now, if you try to go out there and eat leaves off of trees, you probably wouldn't get the nutrition you need. And that's because you don't have the right stomach. You all don't have the right digestive system. So giraffe are what we call ruminants. They're like goats or cows, in that they have a special stomach, a special digestive system that allows them to break down the leaves that they eat. And to give you an idea of what it looks like when they're using their tongues and their lips to work, this is a giraffe eating a tree called an acacia tree. And what you can see there is that really prickly thorns on it that are hooked. So they stick you really good, but the giraffe are remarkably adept and skilled working around the leaves. And you can see it just using those lips and using that tongue to pick this tiny plant. And we're going to go to another one. This is another better view of a giraffe eating at another plant, looking at using its to manipulate the leaves. Use them up and follow with special tongue. So giraffe are also really interesting in that they have, they're big animals, but they have a lifespan of about 25 years in the wild, give or take. We don't really know for certain, but we think they live around 25 years. And baby giraffes are really cool too, because when they come out, when they're first born, they can be up to 6 feet tall. That's taller than me on day one. So they're really big animals from the beginning, and they can walk almost immediately. One time I was really lucky to see a giraffe being born, and from the moment it was born until the moment it was up and walking was only 45 minutes, which is really different than people. Giraffe calves stay with their mothers for about 1.5 to 2 years, and then they go off on their own to explore the world and live their life out in the savannas. And what's interesting about giraffe, so some other animals have breeding seasons, so they'll have special times of the year where they'll give birth. Giraffe don't. Giraffe can give birth throughout the year. So anytime you go out into the savannah, anytime you go to these places in Africa where they are, you can probably see baby giraffe if they're out there. So this is a video I took of a giraffe. It's the giraffe I told you that was just being born. And this is the giraffe getting up and taking its first steps, learning how to walk. And so for a 6-foot-tall animal, getting up and learning how to walk quickly is really important because there's things out there that want to eat these people. So learning how to walk quickly is really important for a baby giraffe. And there he is using his wobbly legs to try to lean up against his mom for some extra. So where do giraffe live then? We know a little bit about giraffe. Where can we go and find them? Giraffe in the wild can only be found in Africa. Right now, they're found in 21 different countries throughout Africa. So we, as scientists, we think there's now 4 species of giraffe spread across these 21 different countries in West, Central, East, and Southern Africa. And if you look at this map here, this is a map of Africa with each one of these little polygons, these shapes, representing where we know giraffe to be. Now, if you look at that map, though, you'll see these landscapes that they live in are incredibly diverse. So giraffe live in these amazingly different environments. So this is a picture of a giraffe I took in a desert in a country called Namibia. This is a picture of giraffe I took in a savanna in a country called Uganda. This is some giraffe in another desert. Look at that, there's not even a tree to be seen. And this is in a place called Etosha National Park in Namibia. And conversely, look at this. There's a bunch of trees on this giraffe, on this population of giraffe, also in Uganda. And then here's some giraffe with some zebras in Kenya. And then there's another savanna here with a beautiful lake in northern Tanzania. So you can see giraffe live all over Africa, and they cover these incredibly different habitats, these incredibly different environments. And so if you look at that, you can compare them all next to each other. They're really, really different places. So as a scientist and as a conservationist, it's really interesting to me to try to figure out how giraffes live in these different places. One last thing we know about giraffe, well, we know a lot of other things, but one important thing we know about giraffe is that they're vulnerable. So if you were to go out and count all the giraffe in Africa right now, there'd be about 111,000. So when we get off here today, I'd love for you guys to check out the population of your nearest town and then compare that to how many giraffe are left in the wild. So right now there's roughly 111,000. So again, compare that to how many people live in your town, and you can see That's in the whole continent of Africa. So this population of giraffe has been declining recently too. So as scientists, we're trying to figure out why there's fewer giraffe now than there's been in the past. And we're going to see if we can change that to make these environments better places for people and giraffe to live together. So I want to talk a little bit about a study that I've been doing and spending the last 5 years. I've been working in a country called Uganda. And if we look at that same map of Africa, Uganda is a country here in East Africa. It's a beautiful place. It's about the size of the state of Oregon, but it has a lot of people in it. So we've been trying to figure out how we can best save giraffes while making sure that the people there can benefit from the presence of giraffe. Now, I said before, but I'll show you in pictures, Uganda is a beautiful place with these incredible animals. We've got lions, we've got potus monkeys, we've got hartebeests. There's these big open landscapes with these enormous animals. There's elephants that go around, and these are animals that you get to see on a daily basis when you're working in some of these national parks. It's amazing to just be driving to work in the morning and you have these elephants that you have to stop because they're crossing the road in front of you. It's so cool. And then there's also these amazing predators, things like lions and hyenas and leopards. So there are these really cool ecosystems where all these animals are living together, and we're trying to figure out this puzzle of how each of these animals interacts with each other. Now, as I mentioned before, there's also a lot of people. So where we work in Uganda, there's people that come up right next to the wildlife. And so that makes an interesting puzzle to try to figure out how people and animals can live alongside each other. Uganda as a country, I said, is about the size of the state of Oregon, but there's more people in Uganda than there are, let's say, in the country of Australia. So there's a lot of people in Uganda, and it's important that we all figure out how people and wildlife can live next to each other. Interesting also, Uganda is a seasonal environment. So if I were to go up to Minnesota or Newfoundland or Ontario right now, I might look outside the window and there'd be snow, but if you go back in June, it's very green and luscious. Uganda's on the equator, so it's slightly different seasons. For them, they have wet seasons and dry seasons. So the wet seasons for them are like in April, in August through November, and it just gets really, really rainy. And then the dry seasons, there's almost no rain in it. It dries up very quickly. So the animals have different seasons than the ones that you may be used to in these temperate environments. So the things we do over there when we try to study giraffe, one of the important questions we ask are how many are there? Are their populations growing? So are there more giraffe in these years than there have been in previous years? How do they move? How do they navigate these environments that they live in, especially when the environments change over seasons? You can imagine, like, if I'm a thing that eats leaves and I live in Ontario, it might be easier for me to get food in June or July than it would to get food in January. Giraffes have similar problems in getting food between the wet seasons and the dry seasons. So trying to understand how they move in these seasonally changing environments, what types of habitats do they like, and what do they eat? These are all really important things for us to try to understand how to protect giraffes. So to do this, we have some really cool systems, really cool, interesting fact of giraffes at house. So giraffes are really cool, and they've got these spot patterns on them. And every giraffe has a unique spot pattern. It's like a fingerprint, and we use them like name tags for the giraffes. So we have a special computer program. So I'll go around these national parks and we'll take pictures of giraffes with a digital camera, and then we can put them into our special computer program, and it'll spit out the name of the giraffe. It'll tell us which giraffe this is. And then over years, over months, over years, we can see where these giraffes are moving. We can see if they're staying in the same places, who they're associating with, whether or not they're surviving into the next seasons, and whether or not there's new giraffes coming in. So we can tell them all apart, and we essentially have a name for every giraffe in the country of Uganda, which is really, really cool. We can do that with the technology. So that's helped us to figure out where giraffe are in Uganda, where they're not in Uganda, and how many there are. And that's important for us to figure out how to best protect them. So if we were to take a time machine and go back into the 1950s, we would have found giraffe all over northern Uganda. So this is a map of Uganda. We would have found them all over northern Uganda. But between the 1950s and the 1990s, giraffe all but disappeared from northern Uganda, and then we only found them in these two places that are outlined in black here. And they went from being in the thousands to less than 100 giraffe at one point, which is really dangerous for the giraffe population. What's interesting though is from the mid-1990s until now, the giraffe populations in these two places have grown. So there's more giraffe now than there were 30 years ago. And it's gotten safer for giraffe outside of these areas. So one of the things we were looking to do is maybe to help giraffe in these areas where there's a lot of them, to recolonize, so take them from those areas and put them back into places where they once were. So we can do this by knowing how many giraffe are out there. Now, another thing we do with giraffes to try to understand them is we put GPS units on them. So like the GPS units that you might have in your phones or your parents might have in their cars that allow us to track where the giraffe go. And then we can use that to understand what types of places they like and how they move around these environments. So we put these GPS units on these giraffes. We have these little things that we put on their heads. They're about the size of a small phone or a deck of cards, and they talk to my satellites. So I can look at these giraffe. I can pull up on my computer here in Virginia and track where all these giraffe are in Uganda without leaving my desk right now. So this is kind of what it looks like. In Uganda, this is how some of the giraffes move. Each one of those dots represents a different giraffe with a GPS unit on it, and you can see how they're moving in the environment. And then we can use pictures from satellites to try to figure out what about those environments these giraffes like. So where are places that giraffes spend more time and what is going on in those places? And we can find out the key resources, the key things that giraffes need to be happy and healthy. So we use this information to do really cool things. And I mentioned one of them before, and that's to try to take giraffe from places where there's a lot of them to places where they used to be, but were extirpated, were made extinct in the past. So there's places that were once really good giraffe habitat where they were poached out, or for whatever reason, they weren't not there anymore. But we know it's really good giraffe habitat. So we'll take some giraffe from one population where they're doing really, really well and help to move them to this other population so that we can grow giraffe and return them to places where they once were. So to do that, we have to catch giraffe, which is quite an exciting exercise. And this is me right here catching one giraffe in Uganda. And what we do is we'll put them in the back of a truck. So we'll steer them in using some ropes, and we'll put them into a back of a truck like this. And you can see this is a truck full of giraffe that we're moving from one national park in Uganda to another. There they are, their heads are sticking out. And once they get in the truck, they're very relaxed. And then we'll take them. And this is giraffe being released into their new home. Oh, and they kick my camera. And off they run into their new home. So this represents a really cool outcome for some of the science. So using the understanding that we developed from these cool studies, where we'll go out and take pictures and identify all the giraffes, and these other cool studies where we'll track them around the environment, and we take the information that we learn from these different scientific studies to find good giraffe habitat and to find healthy populations that we can use to source to take giraffe back to places where they once were and help the population continue to grow. And then we do a lot of other really cool things about giraffe, things that I don't really have time to talk about right now. But if you want to learn more about giraffes and ways you can help, you can check out the Giraffe Conservation Foundation website at www.giraffeconservation.org. And there's a lot of really great information on there for you guys if you want to check it out and learn more about giraffe, not just in Uganda, but with that, I am done with my formal presentation, and I'm happy to take questions. You guys look pretty excited, and I'm pretty excited to see what you guys want to learn about giraffes. So I'm going to stop the screen share right now, and Jesse, it's all you.
Well, thank you so much for that, Mike. That's spectacular. And I'll pass along that link to classes at the end. You also mentioned a giraffe fight. So I'm going to share the best video of a giraffe
Oh,
fight
yeah.
of all time from
Yeah.
BBC with all the classes. You can look for that. It's like 4 minutes at the end of this session. Do check that out. It's awesome. In addition to our live classes, we got some watching on YouTube, including Miss Holden's class in Spruce Grove, Alberta. If you guys want to type in some questions in the chat bar, please do, and I'll pass along as many as I can. But let's get underway. So Miss Przenko's class, if you guys want to kick us off with a question, come on up.
Hi, Ms. Przenko's class.
Oh, I got your mic, guys. Yeah. You should be good. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Yep, Kara.
What do you do when it rains? Where do the giraffes go?
Yeah.
That is actually a really good question. So when it rains, sometimes there's different types of trees in this environment. And just like we have seasons in these temperate zones in North America, remind me again, where are you guys calling from? You guys are in what?
Sorry, Lindsay, Ontario, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So in Ontario, right? So you'll have the summers and the winters. And in the wintertime, you'll lose leaves off of trees. Just like in the dry season for these giraffes, some of the leaves will go off of the trees, but there's different types of trees. So just like there's evergreens and pine trees in Ontario that'll stay green throughout the year, there's some types of trees in these savannas that will stay green throughout the year. So in the dry season, some of these giraffes will move to the places where there's these evergreen trees, and then in the rainy seasons, they'll go back to the places where the trees are only green during the wet seasons. So that's a really good question, and that's one of the things we were only able to find out when we put the GPS units on the giraffe and when we were able to look at the pictures and see where the giraffe were at the different times of the year. So that's a really good question. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Mr. Rutkowski's class, if you guys want to come on up, go for it.
2 questions.
Okay, we have 2 questions.
Sure. Let's do it.
Were giraffes' necks always long in their evolution?
Great. And then we'll come to you guys for a second one in just a second, but yeah.
That is a fantastic question. So if we look at the giraffe family right now, so we've got the 4 species of giraffes, and then we also have another type of animal called an okapi. So okapi are these really cool animals. They almost look like a mix between a giraffe and a zebra, and they live in these rainforests. And you'll see okapis do not have the long neck. So they're in the same family and they're represented from the same evolutionary trajectory, but they don't have a long neck. And giraffe are really cool in that they're the only members of their family, Giraffidae, that have this really, really long neck. So if you go back in history and look at extinct types of giraffe, there were some really diverse looking animals. There's one, for instance, called Shivatherium that was like a giraffe. It almost looked like a moose. It was giraffe size and it had almost like moose looking ossicones, moose looking protuberances on its head, but it didn't have that long neck. And some of the other extinct giraffes didn't have that long neck. So that's one of the unique things about giraffe, not just today among animals that are living, but in evolutionary history, they're unique even in their own family, and that they have this really, really long neck. So that's a fantastic question. Thank you.
All right, and great answer. We'll head back to Mr. Rutkowski's class for a second one. We'll try and do one per class because we're probably going to do a whole second round, guys. We got lots of time. Yeah, come on up.
Oh,
He said go back up.
Good. Yeah.
What are giraffes' horns for?
What are,
Four, yeah.
that's also a great question. So I alluded, giraffe are also cool in that the things on their head, they're actually not technically horns. Giraffe are unique in that the things on their head are called ossicones. That's ossicones, ossicones. And so we talked about how boy giraffe and girl giraffe are different in how big they are. But also, if you look at male giraffes, their horns are just a little bit bigger and more substantial, more massive. And so what people think is that those horns, those ossicones, are used by the males. You saw how they were fighting, and they'll have those ossicones that'll direct all of the weight and all of the pressure from that swinging neck and that swinging head into the giraffe they're fighting. So it's a way to make them a bit more of a more formidable fighter.
Yeah, Great question. It's sort of like what you can imagine a ram or a muskox where they ram heads. It's something that uses a weapon. Very cool.
Right.
All right, Miss Eagles class, if you guys want to come on up, go for it.
Do giraffes swim?
Do giraffes swim? That's actually a very good question, and one that sort of baffled some scientists in the past. So if you look at where giraffes are and where they're not right now, there's places where there's really good giraffe habitat, but it's hard that we don't find them there. And one of the reasons they're separated from places where there are giraffes by rivers. So if they were able to cross those rivers, they could get to those places, but they don't seem to like to cross rivers that they can't walk through. So I've seen giraffe walking through rivers that are up to their chest, about like 6 feet tall. And so I've seen them cross rivers like that, but I've never actually seen them swim. And just a while back, there were I think there were engineers who wrote a study asking if theoretically giraffe were capable of swimming. And just given the shape of the giraffe and how they could hold themselves in the water, the answer is maybe. But we don't see it all that often. We don't see them crossing waters. So if they can walk, they'll occasionally do it, but I've never seen them swim. But that doesn't mean they can't do it.
I love the question. Fantastic, guys.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to take a quick question from a class on YouTube. So Miss Holden's class, again in Spruce Grove, Alberta, grade 3s, they wanted to ask, how do giraffes take care of their calves?
That's a really good question too. So mom giraffes are often very protective. You saw that picture of that video of that little baby giraffe walking around and how wobbly it was. And so it makes a really easy predator for things like lions or leopards or hyenas. And so mom giraffes can be very protective of their young. And sometimes when predators come up and try to eat the babies, they can kick really, really hard. They kick really hard. And they're such big animals that lions and leopards and hyenas and other potential predators will sometimes give them a lot of space and be very respectful of that leg. So mom giraffes can be very, very dangerous when they're trying to protect their young, the things that are trying to eat them, because they kick so hard, and they can kick in any direction. Sometimes they'll use their front feet and their back feet. It's really an impressive thing to see a mom giraffe trying to defend its calf. Yeah.
Excellent, outstanding. All right, Miss Gary's class, if you guys want to come up, go for it.
Is there still a lot of hunting or poaching?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Poaching is a problem in some places, yeah. Particularly in places that there's maybe conflict or war, or people are hungry. Obviously, giraffe can represent a food source. So there are places where giraffe poaching does occasionally happen. But we're trying to work with some partners in certain areas to try to come up with alternative ways of getting food, to reduce poaching, to make sure that the pressure on giraffes is not unsustainable, and that they're safe from these dangers.
This is something that we're seeing in a lot of conservation talks lately, is that poaching has been a big problem for a long time. And if alternatives are provided to the community where it pays more or is more successful or more reasonable to take care of the animals and protect the habitat, people will willingly and readily do that. Gorillas in the Congo and mountain gorillas in general are a great example of that. So you can see that in action, and I'm sure you're witnessing that too, which is a great question, guys.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Miss Hudson's class. Let's go to Newfoundland. If you guys have one, come on.
I want to know how their population is declining.
Yeah.
How they're okay. That's actually a really good question. In that, so I put up a picture or a map of all of Africa, right? And there's 21 different countries where giraffe are. In some countries, they're doing really, really well. So if we look at Uganda, for instance, in the last 30 years, the population's gone up. But if we look in other places, let's say northern Kenya, some of the populations have gone down. And some of the reasons we think the populations are going down, one is poaching, so that's an issue. Another is habitat loss and fragmentation. So as the human population grows and the livestock population grows, there can be increasing pressure on some of these landscapes, and maybe less space and less shrubbery for giraffes to eat and consume. So trying to figure out ways where giraffe and people can live alongside each other is a really important solution to some of this problem and some of these threats.
Excellent, Mike. Thank you so much. All right, quick other question from YouTube. So Miss Hutchinson's class has asked a whole bunch from Northeast Hope School, but I love this one particularly. How do you capture a giraffe without hurting it?
That's a good question as well. The animal welfare, the safety of the animal is obviously the most important thing to us. So a lot of times we work with the best vets in all of Africa, and we usually work with the vets from the host country as well to make sure that we're using the best practices. And what they do is they'll use a tranquilizer to try to slow the animal down and calm it, and then we'll use some ropes to gently guide it to the ground. So once the animal is starting to feel the effects of the tranquilizer, a team will go out with some ropes and gently guide it to the ground, and then you can hold it on the ground and immediately administer the reversal. So then we cover the eyes and we cover the ears, because giraffes, like a lot of other animals, when they can't hear and they can't see the dangers, they're generally a little less stressed. So we'll use tranquilizers, we'll use blindfolds and ear covers, and we'll use the best available veterinarians to make sure that the animals are safe and healthy when we do these sort of things.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mike. What a great answer. And something that we don't usually cover in these sort of sessions is how you transfer animals and what's going on. So I'm really glad we got to that question. All right, I'm going to go to Delbarton in West Virginia. As Miss Hancheff's class, I'm going to take 2 questions from you guys. I always like when we can get small towns to get a bunch of questions. So please do start with one, and I'll come right back in just a second for you guys.
Okay, sounds good. Go ahead, Zoe. Big and loud.
Do they make noises?
Yeah.
Do they make noises? Man, you guys are asking some fantastic questions. And so this is something that's very sort of recently coming out in the science right now. So occasionally giraffes will make noises if they get really stressed. So you were asking what moms will do with calves when they're being attacked. Sometimes a stressed mom will make a snorting or almost a roaring kind of noise. And calves will occasionally make bleating noises, like a calf, like a baby cow. But most of the time, giraffes are silent. You can't hear them. I've studied giraffe for years and years and years, and I've only ever seen them make noises on 3 or 4 occasions. But there's some scientists out there that think that giraffe can communicate in sound frequencies that are outside of what we're able to hear. So just like dogs, sometimes they'll hear like a dog whistle that you and I wouldn't be able to hear. There's people who think giraffes may be able to hear outside of the audible range of human sounds. So there might be more to giraffe sounds and giraffe communication than we currently know. And it's actually an area that people are still studying right now.
Yeah. Just a quick follow-up on that, Mike. So you mentioned infrasound, something where it's really high-pitched like a dog. Ultrasound. Now, with a dog or bat, it's something that's too high for us to hear. With elephants, they've got this rumble that's too deep for us to hear. Is it more like that with giraffes? Do we think it's a really high-pitched or really low-pitched sound?
So the working hypothesis, that's a lower frequency, similar to what you might expect with elephants, yeah.
Yeah, very cool. All right.
Potentially, it's still open for debate though. We're still working on it, yeah.
With a caveat. Well, that's the thing about science, and I always like
That is.
highlighting that in these sessions, is that there's so much more to learn. Like we don't know everything by any means, which is really exciting for up and coming science.
No, especially with giraffes. Like there is so much, there's a lot that we do know, but there's still so much we don't know. And that's what makes it so exciting to work in this field, in that we get to discover new things every day. It's not just reading about giraffes in a book. We're going out and we're trying to figure out these things. We're trying to figure out if giraffe make these noises, how giraffe navigate their environments, what they're eating and why they're eating the things they eat. So there's still a lot we need to learn so that we can better protect these animals. And that's what we're working on doing with the Giraffe Conservation Foundation and Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute.
Very cool. Fantastic. All right, let's go back to Delbarton, and then we'll wrap up with our first round. One last question from Miss Levine's class, who joined us a bit in. So yeah, Delbarton, guys, go for it.
How many brown spots do they have?
Yeah.
It's different. Every giraffe has a different spot pattern. But what's cool is that we talked about how there's different species of giraffe, there's different types of giraffe, and depending on what species of giraffe we're looking at, you can have different types of spots. So if you look at, there's a type of giraffe in Kenya. Hold on a sec. I have some paintings just up here. Let me grab them for you. Sorry, I wasn't expecting that, but I'll show you. So these are some paintings I did. This is what we call a Maasai giraffe. So this is a type of giraffe that lives in a country called Kenya, or is found in Tanzania as well. So this is a Maasai giraffe. Take a close look at those spots right there. This is another giraffe that's found in Kenya, a different one, called a reticulated giraffe. So you can look at the spot patterns there, and it's like a different, almost a different pattern of giraffe. So like I said, within every individual giraffe has its own spot pattern, but across different species, they have different general types of patterns. So you can see side by side how they kind of look a little different. So cool. The answer is every giraffe is different, and we don't have one answer for that.
Yeah, and as for how many, what we'll do is we'll send you guys some pictures of giraffes, and you can start counting and let us know. 2,943. Awesome question, guys. All right, so yeah, Miss Levine's class, grade 6s in Thunder Bay, Ontario, joined us. You've got 2 things on, so I'm going to click one and see if it's the right one for demuting you, and we'll see if it is. Miss Levine's group, you should be good.
Hello?
Hey.
Hello?
Hi.
Hey. Okay, it's working. Are giraffes currently listed as an animal at risk of extinction?
Yes. So there's an organization of conservationists called the IUCN. And that's sort of the group of people who decide whether or not animals are endangered. And I'm actually a member of that group for giraffe and okapi. And what we did was we got all these giraffe scientists together in a room, and we went through all the best evidence we have of what the numbers of giraffe are across all of Africa. And what we decided in 2015 was giraffe are vulnerable as a whole, as of all giraffe in Africa are listed as vulnerable. And then each different type of giraffe, depending on how it is regionally, has a slightly different categorization. So yes, giraffe are at risk for extinction. If you go to Africa now, I gave you the number, just over 110,000. There's a lot more elephants in Africa at the moment. And that's not to say what the elephants are facing isn't a risky situation, but it puts the giraffe's conservation status in a rather harsh perspective. If there's fewer giraffes than there are elephants in Africa.
Great question, guys. You know what? We got a student waiting in Miss Levine's class. I'll come back to you, and then I'll go back through in a whole second round after one YouTube question in there as well. So Miss Levine's student, if you guys want to ask, go for it.
How do wild giraffes?
Oh, you're good. Yeah.
Okay. How do wild giraffes act around the humans living around them?
Great question.
It is a great question. So the answer there is it depends. Giraffes, let's use an animal that you guys might be more familiar with. So if you go like to a white-tailed deer, for instance, or for the people who live in the East, if you go out into the wild areas, places where deer are feeling pressure from people, they might be a bit more scared of you. They might be a bit more frightened of you. But if you go to like a suburban place, a place where there's no pressure on the deer, where people live alongside, they'll eat in gardens and stuff, oftentimes deer aren't afraid of people. And we see that sometimes with giraffes as well. So there's one place in Africa, a country called Niger, where giraffe and people live very closely next to each other. And oftentimes you'll see people in giraffe in very, very close, relaxed relationships. In other places where giraffes might get pressure from people or might be poached, they might be a bit more fearful and less comfortable around people. And so it's different from place to place and giraffe by giraffe.
Excellent, guys. All right, I'm going to go to Miss Eagle's class because they got to go to lunch. And I know that we're going a little over time, but that's exceptional because we got so many great questions, guys. Are just fantastic. So Miss Eagle's group, come on up.
Have you ever found an albino giraffe? Also, has anybody gotten hurt by a giraffe?
Yeah.
Yes. So there's actually some really cool giraffes out there that some people who have found in studies. There's one in Tanzania. That's a white giraffe. And there's actually this one really cool giraffe up in northern Kenya that was a white giraffe. And it turns out it was a female, and she ended up having a giraffe that was also white as a baby. So it was a mom and a baby white giraffe. And so white giraffes occasionally pop up all over the place. There's a few out there that we know of now, and I bet there's even more that we don't know of. And second question, have anyone ever been hurt by giraffe? On occasion. So giraffe are generally very gentle animals, but they're really, really big. So even if they accidentally do something around people, if they accidentally move their head and bump someone, or accidentally hit them with their leg, it can be dangerous for a person. So there have been instances of people getting hurt and even dying from giraffe, but it's very, very, very rare.
Yeah, like all big animals and like all animals you encounter in the wild, just show them respect. If you ever get a chance to see a giraffe, don't walk right up. To them you're a stranger. You're not something that they're used to, and that's just a good lesson for any sort of wildlife. Excellent. All right. You know what? Before we do our last 4 questions live, and again, if you guys have to go, just send me a message to say that you need questions really quick, but we're doing great, guys. We had a class that was going to join, a Miss Jennings class, and I wanted to pass along their question because I think it's really important for a conservation perspective. And that is, what do you think of giraffes what do you think of giraffes in zoos?
What do I think of giraffes in zoos? Well, that's a really good question, and one that maybe you guys should think about as well. When you go to a zoo and you see a giraffe, how do you feel about that situation? Does it make you want to love the animal and protect it in the wild? The way I typically look at zoos is that they're very good at generating public support. They're very good educational and outreach type of environments. So these animals are ambassadors for their wild cousins, and they get people who might not have the chance to go over to Africa and see them in the wild, to get to experience them and spend time and learn about them, and then learn about the troubles that their cousins in the wild are facing. I also know we work a lot with zoos out there. They're really good partners for conservation about directing funds to projects in the field. We've worked with a lot of zookeepers, and I know for a fact that most of the zookeepers that we work with absolutely love the animals that they care for. And those giraffes get a very thoughtful and loving environment to grow and be happy and healthy. So they're great ambassadors for their wild cousins, and they're really good at generating support for conservation initiatives in the field.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a really thoughtful answer. And for me personally, getting to go to the Toronto Zoo as a kid and seeing giraffes, that made it so much more special to get to go to Africa and see them live, because it was such a remarkable, something that I'd seen before and was really excited about. So I love the answer. Thank you so much for that. All right, let's go back to our questions. I'm going to go to Miss Hudson's class first. We got 4 to go. You guys are great. Thanks for holding hands. Hey, do you guys have a question?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Come on up.
Our teacher's not in class right now.
Ooh.
So go for it. Ask away.
How long have giraffes been on this earth?
Yeah. No pressure.
That's a good. I should know this. I don't know it off the top of my head. So giraffes have been around for millions of years, but giraffes, as we currently know them as giraffes, have been around for a few million years. I'm not quite sure exactly how many off the top of my head, and that's something I'm embarrassed I don't know.
That's okay.
I'm getting stumped. But they've been around for millions of years. And before that, there were earlier versions of giraffes running around as well. So giraffe have been a part of this planet for a long, long time. And we hope that with the efforts that we're doing now, they'll continue to be a part of these environments for a long time to come.
Fantastic. All right, how about Miss Brzezinko's class? And then we'll wrap up with one from Miss Gary's group in a second.
Emmett? Yeah, what is the all-time favorite thing to eat?
What is their all-time favorite thing to eat?
That's something I'm really interested in, what giraffe eat and why they eat the things they eat. So this wasn't really part of your question, but to answer your question, it depends, because giraffe are all across Africa, And just as they're in different places, there's different types of plants in all those places where they are. So there's not one type of plant that covers the whole area, but there's different types of plants that they like. So I mentioned that some of these plants have spines, and some of them have thorns that make them hard to eat. But another thing that these plants have, a lot of them have like these chemicals, these toxins, these poisons for things that eat them. So giraffes have to navigate this foraging landscape. They need to eat. There's a bunch of different plants out there, and they need to pick which one they can get a lot of leaves off of quickly, which one has the right nutritional components, and which one isn't going to poison them. So they need to figure this whole thing out while they're eating. And so where I work in Uganda, I can tell you exactly what types of plants they like. There's certain types of trees called acacia. And in this one place in Uganda, if you'll indulge me with some Latin names, there's a few types of trees. One's called Acacia senegal, one's called Acacia siberiana, that are really, really important for the giraffe there. They also like Acacia drepanalobium, sometimes known as the whistling thorn acacia. And in this particular population, there's two other plants that they really seem to like, one called Harrisonia abyssinica and another called Crotava adansini. So that just goes to say giraffe like a lot of different plants. Acacias are one of the really common ones that people say they like, though, and for good reason.
Excellent answer. And for all the classes, I'm going to send along a quiz when we're done. You're going to need to spell all of those Latin names, okay? So I hope you're all ready. All right, you know what? We're going to wrap it up with Miss Gary's class. Come on up, guys, to ask one more question. I know we have way more questions than we could possibly take in a session, so I really appreciate the enthusiasm, and we'll ask in a minute if there's ways we can take more. But for now, Miss Gary's class, go for it.
They stay in their own families or herds?
Yeah.
Sort of. So this is another really cool thing about giraffe, is they have this social system we call fission fusion. So we can look at some animals, like let's say a plain zebra, for instance, and you'll have like this one family unit, and you'll find them on a Tuesday, and then you'll go out again on a Friday, and they'll be the exact same family unit. So they're these very cohesive families that always stay together. Giraffe are interesting in that they typically like to be in groups, but the composition of the group changes even over the span of a day. So one of the things that we've done is well, when we're trying to figure out what giraffe will eat, we'll follow one giraffe the whole day and catalog what it's doing. But while we're doing that, we'll see it interact. Well, it'll start with one group in the morning, and then we'll watch as it moves, and it'll come across another group on the savanna, and two members from this group will join that group, and two members from that group will join this group, and then they'll spread off again, and they'll do that multiple times over the day. So sometimes people think that giraffe might have close associations between calves that were raised together. So if you had a friend growing up, you might be more likely to spend more time with that friend, or mothers that are raising calves together typically spend more time together. But as a whole, at least with our current understanding, and this is still open for more study, this is still something we don't know completely about giraffes yet, but we don't think that they have very strong families, but they do like to be together. But those groups will often change in which members are part of it.
Yeah. Mike, this has been fantastic. Before we wrap up, I just want to ask, because again, we have more questions we could possibly take during one session. How can kids go and learn more about giraffes? I'm going to share the GCF site, Smithsonian. I'm going to show them a copy and albino giraffe pictures in the fight video. Is there anywhere else we can send them, or if they want to get engaged, what can they do?
Yeah, definitely check out the giraffeconservation.org. There's some great resources on there. They go a little more depth. They have these cool Africa's giraffe conservation guides that you can go and download and print out if you want, or look at on your computer screens. And there's all sorts of great information in there about all the different types of giraffe. A lot of the questions you've been asking, you can follow up right on the Giraffe Conservation website. So that's a great place to start.
Fantastic. Mike, this has been amazing, man. And so I know this is your first time, so how this runs now is I'm going to demute everyone's microphone. And so boys and girls, if you guys could join me in saying a huge thank you to Mike for joining us today. You are all now demuted, and you can go for it.
Thank you, guys.
Just make it see everyone.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, guys. This was great.
Yeah, great questions, everyone. You guys are so enthusiastic. I love it. Again, look forward to having you back soon. And Mike, you're welcome back anytime. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Jesse.